This is the Zac Anesbury Show.
Welcome. On today's podcast clip, we have Professor Billy Sung from Curtin University, Perth, Australia.
I'm a professor of consumer psychology and neuroscience at Curtin University, based in Perth. And basically, I specialize in consumer biometrics and neuroscience research. What that means is basically I use biometric measurements like eye tracking, facial expression, skin inductance, heart rates, brainwave, so on and so forth, to better understand consumers and how they make decisions. One of the things that I actually do at Curtin University is to lead a consumer research lab. So this is a research team that really does a lot of industry consulting, and we call it demand-driven research, but basically industry research to actually optimize marketing assets. So a lot of the television commercials, some of the out-of-home ads that you might see around Australia, even some in Singapore and Hong Kong, some of them are actually tested by us in the consumer research lab at Curtin University.
Very cool. And I'm sure we're going to talk about a lot of that and more, which I can't wait because, the more I look into you, Billy, the more I find out and the more it's all pretty exciting. But I'd like to just take you back to perhaps when you were younger. I don't know, you might have been a young man or during primary school, high school. When did you think, I want to enter sort of psychology, probably from what I can tell, or maybe the marketing field as a whole? Do you remember having like an aha moment or a series of events or something like that?
That's a good question. So, and it takes me back a long, long while. So, I guess different to a lot of marketing academics, I'm actually not a trained marketer. I would say I'm more a psychologist. So my training, my bachelor's, my honors, and my postgrad and PhDs are all in psychology. In fact, more so in neuropsychology, neuroscience, and decision making, and those type of psychological field. Now, I guess casting my mind back when I was really young and how I decided to be a psychologist or at least study psychology, is probably when I saw a drama called Lie to Me. I'm not sure if you remember that drama. It's basically based on Ekman's face model theory. So basically, Lie to Me is kind of like a US drama that actually shows how this really expert in reading facial expression that has a consultancies that actually tells when people lie. So, they'll be solving, murder cases, helping US government to disband terrorist group and all these different, drama. Now, when I was really young, I didn't have a psychology, training, saw the drama and go, that is so interesting. And that is so cool. And so I was like, oh, I really want to be him. I want to be able to tell whether people are lying or telling the truth based on, minute facial expression. And you can actually classify facial expression in an instance, right? But obviously, as you delve into the literature, you kind of know that actually, that facial coding that is done manually is probably not that accurate and not that valid. And so it kind of, during my career, I had an epiphany and kind of go, okay, well, what else? And so that's why we jumped into biometrics. But I think that's how we started off with psychology. And then I guess what I did was I did a bachelor in psychological science. What's interesting is that, look, I'm an Asian, so I have typical Asian parents. If you tell them, I want to be a policeman, doing forensic psychology, they'll go, I have no idea what that is. But if you say, I'm going to be a psychologist, like a clinical psychologist, they'll be, oh yeah, that's professional, right? They're doctors, right? So they're okay with it. So I went with Bachelor of Psych Science in honors, and very soon I realized that in a psychology bachelor, it doesn't guarantee you to have even further training that you require to be a counselor or a clinical psychologist. And to be honest, I actually found out why I was interested in that whole idea about reading facial expression, because what's something that I lack personally is that I actually have no empathy. So
Oh, really? Oh, wow. I won't come to you if I'm in times of need.
Exactly. I think if you ask my wife right now, she'll definitely agree with you. Like, I am the most robotic person you can probably find in the whole world, because if jokes aside, I mean from a joking perspective, if I always tell my student this, like when my students say I don't understand this, and I'll explain it. I still don't understand it. I'll go, I really don't understand why you don't understand it. I literally explained it to you. No empathy at all. And so obviously, as you probably know, a clinical psychologist requires quite a great amount of empathy to do the job. Even to do a reasonable job, you have to have a certain level of empathy. And so from, I think, third year, or when we have to decide, what honors project we're going to go into. So honors is basically a research project that you do in bachelor, a whole 1 year long program that's focused on research. I said, look, I'm really not cut out for clinical psychology. And so I needed to find something else to do. And so I fall into perception psychology and neuropsychology. What's interesting is I was actually trained in a more of a perception lab. So looking at, really basic, how people perceive certain things. So how do people perceive faces, and all those kind of things. So perception, really hardcore, basic psychology, where, you might have doing experiment where the oddball paradigm, where two balls collide, and when they collide, there's a sound. So when there's a sound, you normally see that as two ball bouncing each other. If you don't hear the sound, you actually see the ball crossing each other, but objectively, they're the same. So kind of like, why is that the case? How does the brain interpret those perception? And looking at more neuropsychological kind of theories, so on and so forth. And I got interested in not actually the hardcore science, but actually going back and going, wait a minute, that really reminds me of facial expression. And as we learn, facial expression, yes, it might have validity, but you can't really manually code them. It's very hard to manually code them. They're minute, milliseconds kind of responses. And so you probably need electrical responses and, AI, computer vision to actually do it. And so actually at that point, that's when the boom of biometric coming in. So there is computer science, AI, and, all these electrical sensor equipment that are becoming cheap. And so I was thinking, we can actually do something here. And one of the things that I always say is, then I read this article about how you can use fMRI to look at how brain actually value products. So if I give you two option A or option B, how much do you perceive this to be of value, and how much do you perceive this as of value, and that decide what you pick. And I go, that's interesting. I wonder if we could apply biometrics into consumer. And I start reading consumer behavior, marketing literature, and I go, there's really not much. And so that's how I kind of fall into the whole marketing and business discipline. I'm sorry for the long-winded story.
That's really
That's
cool.
how I got into psychology and marketing.
Yeah, so it started off simply by you watched a TV show as a child and you thought, this is really cool. Yeah, isn't it funny how life kind of has those little moments?
Yes.
If your parents were not busy at that time, or you didn't, sneak in a bit of TV or whatever it happened to be, your life could have turned out quite different. That's really cool. So you mentioned there that you did your undergraduate degree. So you did that at the University of Queensland?
That's right.
Yeah. So very prestigious university. Sort of anyone who's not in Australia, that's kind of the northeast part of our country. And is University of Queensland is located? Is your campus in Brisbane there, in the actual centre, or
Brisbane? Yes.
Cool. That sounds good. So, did you grow up in Queensland? Is that how you ended up there?
Yeah, so my family immigrated to Australia when I was about 10 or 11. So to be honest, I have grown up in Australia, so mostly in Brisbane. So I think I've spent, a good 20 years in Brisbane before moving away for Sydney for 6 months, Melbourne, I think for about 4 or 5 months. And then finally, when I finished my PhD, I went to Perth. So this year, at the end of this year, it will be the 8th year in Perth.
Yeah, and I don't know. I feel like Australia has like a overarching culture, but there's definitely different subcultures within each one of these capital cities. So that must have been a pretty cool life experience moving all around.
Yes.
So your bachelor's degree, sort of 3-year program, then you moved into honors. Was honors like an exclusive thing to get into? Was it like, Billy has, GPA of, whatever it happened to be, and then we'll invite him? Or how did you sort of opt into that one?
Yes. So in Australia, most universities, I think the honors degree in pretty much most discipline has basically you need to be in a certain average GPA, and I think when I did it in my time, it was I think an average GPA of 80 to get into an honors program, and basically it's the 4th year of your bachelor degree that you can opt in to do honors. You can also do a 4th year in psychology that is fully coursework, and we call it the PAS stream. So basically it's the 4th year of coursework in psychology. But for honors, it's the 4th year where you actually do half of your year on a coursework. So you do a lot of research related, coursework. And then the other half of the year or the other semester, you actually work on a intense research project with your assigned supervisor. But normally what happens is the honors supervisor will want to work with you at the start of the year because, it's really difficult to get ethics and get all the research and get all the analysis and write out the thesis in just, under 4 months, which is essentially a semester.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that. So we had the exact same difficulty. So I was the second to last cohort who did honors degrees at UniSA. We try to transition people straight to a master's by research now. And it was pretty much for that exact same reason. At the time, ethics approval took far too long. That's all been really streamlined now. We have a much better process. But yeah, it was about that data collection, getting ethics, knowing the literature enough to actually contribute significantly. So that's one of the reasons we don't have it anymore. But yeah, we also had coursework as well, which was similar to you. So it seems like the programs were very similar and we experienced something quite, obviously I didn't do it in psych, but that's really interesting because I don't meet too many other people who have done honors, which is, it's nice to meet someone else. So you, I'm guessing then, because you then did your PhD there as well. I'm guessing you must have got like a first class honors then, and then that allowed you to skip like not a traditional, but the alternative route of doing like a master's by research, right?
That's right. So generally, to qualify for a PhD, I think even in Australia right now, most university requires you to demonstrate that you have completed a degree that has at least 25% research related coursework or program. That certainly is the case at Curtin right now because I just got through a case to actually assess them. And basically, as you can see, 4-year bachelor program, 1 year is honors. So literally you can claim that 1 year is the 25% of the research related. Now for PhD, as you know, you need not only that requirement, but also you need to demonstrate substantial research capability. And so generally it's a first class honors or second class. So first class honors is pretty much a must for a PhD in some sense, or a PhD scholarship. Second class is you may or may not get enrolled into. And if you do get something like a second class or you don't get an honors, then what happens is we have to go through another route or another entry pathway, which could be a master or like a clinical master if it's in psychology. It could be a practical master. It could be even a MPhil or master by research, as you said.
Hey guys, it's Zac Anesbury here with just a couple of quick reminders. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, then make sure you subscribe so you never miss an episode. There are plenty more interviews to come with some of the world's leading marketing academics and practitioners. You do not want to miss these. In the meantime, if you're looking for another way to connect, then follow me on Twitter at Zac Anesbury. That is ZACANESBURY. For my take on the marketing issues of the day.
That was the Zac Anesbury Show.